Alright guys, today we're going to be comparing the new iPhone 13 Pro to the older OnePlus 7 Pro. This is actually still my daily driver. A lot of people have been asking, am I going to upgrade to the 13 Pro over this? And I think I'm still going to keep the 7 Pro until it pretty much stops getting updates, and then I'll try to figure out what to do from there. So you can get the 13 Pro for $1,000. I have that link down below. 7 Pro you can actually pick up used refurbished market for around $300 now. Alright guys, you can see the 7 Pro is much taller than the 13 Pro, but the iPhone 13 Pro is definitely much heavier, and it looks like it's thicker than the 7 Pro as well. So that's something that I wanted to point out there. As you guys can see, the button placement. So camera modules you can see on the iPhone are pretty big as well too. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the displays here, because this is the big reason why a lot of 7 Pro users keep the display. So with the iPhone 13 Pro, it has the Super Retina XDR OLED display, 120Hz HDR10, 6.1 inches, 1170 by 2532, 460 for the PPI. On the 7 Pro, you do have a much bigger 6.67 inch display. It's a Fluid AMOLED 90Hz display, HDR10, but it actually has a 1440p resolution, 516 for the PPI. And the 7 Pro is definitely a little bit more vibrant looking display, or I guess you could say more colorful looking display, something that I noticed. And then as far as just overall display experience, you have very slim bezels on both, but the iPhone does have a smaller notch now, but it's still, still a notch, and the 7 Pro has no notch. It uses the pop-up camera mechanism. It really just feels like you're holding a screen in your hand with the 7 Pro. And yeah, so pretty much everything you do on the 7 Pro is going to just feel really immersive compared to pretty much any phone with any type of punch hole or any type of notch on it. So just, that's one thing to note. That's why I've kept this phone around so much. The display experience is just really, really great on the 7 Pro. So I feel like, the 7 Pro still has one of the best displays. Alright, so let's talk about the specs a little bit more. iOS 15 on the iPhone 13 Pro, Apple A15 chip, and then we have 128 gigs of internal storage, 6 gigs of RAM, no SD card support. The 7 Pro, we do have the Snapdragon 855 on Android 11, and then we also have 128 gigs of internal storage, 6 or 8 gigs of RAM depending on your configuration. Most of the configurations you'll find with 8 gigs of RAM. I just got stuck with the 6 gigs of RAM somehow. But as far as benchmarks here, of course the iPhone is definitely going to kill the 7 Pro in speed and performance and stuff like that. It's just going to be an overall faster phone. It's got a newer chipset. Just to give you guys a quick little comparison here, I'll just launch some games here. Now, one funny thing is the 7 Pro actually does have a 90 FPS option for PUBG, which I'll show you guys, which I thought was pretty funny. So, I'm sure it'll come to the iPhone eventually, but I thought that was funny. You can see the 7 Pro is not like it's super far off or super slow or anything. You can see, but yeah, the 13 Pro is definitely going to be, a second or two faster when you're getting into applications and stuff like that. Let's try YouTube. 7 Pro looks like it actually kind of beat it there. iPhone loaded up that video first though. But you can see not too bad here. Now for overall gaming performance, obviously, you're going to have a better time with the 13 Pro. The only game that I noticed that kind of stuttered a little bit, and I have a full gaming test, was Fortnite on this phone. Now with other Snapdragon 855 phones, I was able to play it fine at max settings. But, the 7 Pro kind of like, it was a little glitchy with Fortnite. But everything else, this phone actually kills and plays very fast. So, will you notice the difference between the 90 Hz and 120 Hz? Kind of, a little bit, but not really. Like, you really have to pay attention. Like, it's not going to be like that big of a difference. You barely notice it. You go to graphics here, as you can see on the 7 Pro, when that update does come, you can see I have 90 FPS option, and I don't have that option on the iPhone. But they actually both can go up to Ultra HD. And you know, I'm gonna keep saying this over and over again. The viewing experience does play a big part in, you know, this phone. I think, you know, playing games on here is just better, just because of the display. You don't have to cut out or whatever. But you know, it's just a thing that is dependent on the person, because it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal to a lot of people. But I do just like this really cool full screen look. It does look very futuristic, always has, you know, when I first got this phone. Both these phones have stereo speakers. Let's go ahead and see what they sound like side by side here. Max volume. So 13 Pro, definitely much louder bass. Very noticeable. And I think the 13 Pro is just overall louder. Yeah, so not bad for both, but the 13 Pro, definitely the louder and bassier speaker here. Alright, so I do want to talk about the additional features you get with this phone. So I want to talk about the biometrics. You do have a under-display fingerprint sensor, which is extremely fast on the 7 Pro here, and they also give you the option to do face unlock as well. So just getting into your phone is just going to be better on the 7 Pro, because you just have a better experience. I mean, well, not so much a better experience, but you have more options. I mean to say, like, having 2 options is always a plus for me. Just to be able to have that option. With the iPhone, you do not have any type of fingerprint sensor. You just have the Face ID, which works fine. But like I said, I would love to have Touch ID back in the iPhone, in the power button under the display somewhere. I think giving people that second option is always going to be extremely helpful in certain situations. So both of these phones do have NFC. The iPhone has Apple Pay. You know, you have NFC on the 7 Pro, so that's taken care of. Alright, so let's talk about the camera. So on the 13 Pro, you have a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide that also acts as a macro lens. And then you have 4K video, 24, 60, and 30 FPS with a 12 megapixel selfie that shoots in 4K at 24, 25, 30, and 60 FPS. Basically, if you were thinking about upgrading to the 13 Pro because you just want overall better cameras, then you definitely are going to get overall better cameras. The 13 Pro does have just better cameras in general, better video than the 7 Pro here. So you'll really enjoy, I believe, the 13 Pro coming from the 7 Pro. Colors, everything is going to look really great. Also, detail is going to be there. You do have a macro lens to play with, which is really fun. Cinematic video is going to be on here as well, so you're getting a pretty good camera upgrade. The 7 Pro, using this phone, it's a reliable shooter. I still take photos with it occasionally if it's just the only phone that I have with me. It's got a triple camera setup, a 48 megapixel standard, an 8 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide 4K video, 30 or 60 FPS, and then a pop-up selfie cam at 16 megapixels that shoots in 1080p. Basically, if you're in good lighting, I think for any casual shooter, the 7 Pro still takes a really good shot to me. Just compared to, like, you know, the Samsungs and, you know, the iPhones, Pixels, it's not going to take overall the best photos. So just know, just know that. But for a casual shooter, I think you'll be perfectly fine if you do decide to keep your 7 Pro. I don't have an issue with it personally. Alright, so let's talk about battery performance here. So on the 7 Pro, we do have a 4,000 milliamp battery with 30 watt charging on here. And I can definitely get all day battery life with this phone still. So I had zero issues with battery life, and the good thing about this phone is that it charges up really quickly. Yes, there is no type of wireless charging or anything like that, so do note that. And with the 13 Pro, we have a 3095 milliamp battery with 20-watt charging, so slightly slower charging than the 7 Pro. But you do have the MagSafe wireless charging and on here as well, and you get very good battery life, very good battery life. I'm extremely impressed with the 13 Pro. It definitely has better battery life than the 7 Pro. I don't know, how with such a smaller battery. I'm assuming it's got to be this Apple A15 chip. But the battery life is extremely impressive on here. So I'm really blown away just using it the past couple of days. Very impressed. So what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.